I want to ask you a question. I want you to raise your hands if you know what it's like to lose yourself in motherhood. I want to ask you, how did you feel? What was life like for you? And did you desperately want to just get back to who you knew yourself to be, like the old you, right? Was that your story? Because I know that was my story. Because over the last few years, I have literally been on a quest to get back to me, right? Because I lost myself so early on in motherhood because of how I became a single mom. That honestly became a point of trauma for me. So I was navigating single motherhood from a place of proving, from a place of trying to feel qualified, from a place of trying to make sure that my kids did not feel lack because I'm a single mom. And because of that, I was overcompensating. I threw myself only into motherhood, began neglecting every other part of me that existed before children. I literally did not care about myself. I did not shower, wash my hair, wear clean clothes. I isolated myself because everything became about my children. I even put my own business down for about 3 years just to be able to lean in single-handedly into motherhood, because my biggest thing was I was not going to fail my kids. I did not want them to feel lack because I'm a single mom. I didn't want them to feel any of those things. And so I threw every ounce of what I had and who I was into motherhood. And because of that, I ended up losing myself in who I always knew myself to be. A hardworking, driven person, goal-oriented person, right? All of that became foreign to me under my new life of motherhood. And it got to the point where I had no idea who I was anymore. But the crazy part of that was that it was not unfamiliar territory for me. Because I remember being teased when I was 12 for wearing non-name brand shoes, I ended up going through this phase of my life where I became such a chameleon, trying to figure out who everybody else thought that I should be. And that is who I became. And so I got to the point where I was in my mid-20s and I had no idea who I was. So when it came around the second time in motherhood, this was familiar territory for me. But the thing is, even though it was familiar territory for me, it became a place of comfort. It became a place of peace, even though it was very uncomfortable and not very peaceful at all. And so I was living with this almost dichotomy of who am I? But if I go trying to figure out who I am, does this mean that I'm going to be a bad mom? What does this mean for my kids if I begin to prioritize me? So what do I do in the meantime? I just decided to go on a quest to get back to me. But the interesting thing is that as I began to think about this more recently, the Lord gave me a revelation, right? Because the journey to want to go back to who you were makes a lot of sense when you lost yourself, because that's all you know. So you're going back to what is familiar, going back to what is comfortable, going back to what you know, because that was that last place on that line before you lost yourself. So it makes sense to want to go back to that place. And I used to talk about my journey of getting back to me. I would talk about it in clubhouse rooms. I would talk about it to moms. And we would talk about the things that we needed to do to be able to prioritize ourselves, to be able to get back to us. However, a revelation that the Lord gave me recently, which is why I wanted to come on and record this video, is that I don't really actually want to get back to me. I don't want to get back to the old me. Matter of fact, Ephesians 4 verses 22 through 24 says, "So put off your old self, which belongs to your former manner of life and is corrupt through deceitful desires, and put on the new self, created after the likeness of God in true righteousness and holiness." And so the Lord started to convict my spirit, like, going back to the old me is tantamount to going backwards. It's going backwards in life, because that old me no longer exists. That old me was for a different stage in life that is not on this new stage in life. And so as we're going through life, we always need to keep going forward, 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 forward. And so when we say we want to get back to the old me, when we say we want to get back to who we are, that is equivalent to saying that we want to go back in the past and become who God has already delivered us from. And we're not willing to walk in the newness of who he has created us to be now for this season and the seasons to come. Because what I really think that we're trying to say in those moments is we know that where we're at is not working. We know that where we're at isn't who God has called us to be. And so we want to be able to move forward, break free from whether it's stuckness, stagnation, or what, and become who God has called us to be. But we have to recognize that who God has called us to be is not going to be back. It's going to be forward, because every experience that we have in life is positioning us to become who God has created us to be. Because we have to remember that the trials have purpose. The setback has purpose. And all of those things are weaving together this intricate, mosaic, right? Or tapestry of who God is calling us to be, also within the greater plans of his salvation and what he is doing to reconcile the world through and the universe and all things through Jesus Christ, and be able to finally redeem the world from sin and to create a new earth. And so we all play a part of that. And so the things that I've started to realize is that the trials are also the things that help make me and help shape me. And going back means that I skip those things. So I end up missing an intricate part of who it is that I am and who God has called me to be. And so similar to the Israelites, I find myself beginning to look back with favorable eyes instead of recognizing it as the bondage that it actually was. And so as I started to reflect on this, as the Lord started to download the message for this video, he began to reveal to me that past season actually wasn't something that I wanted to return to. Yes, there were some high points. Yes, there was financial abundance. Yes, there were some amazing relationships that I had, but there was also a lot of pain in that past season. There was a lot of betrayal, awful dating experiences, financial stress because you can be broke and have money at the same time if you don't spend it properly. And that old season also came with broken friendships, heartache, insecurity, emotional stress, anxiety, panic attacks, the need for validation, defining myself based upon my accomplishments and what other people said and who other people said that I was. It also had not knowing who I was, not understanding my value, indecision, becoming a chameleon to maintain friendships and relationships, self-sabotage, and feelings of feeling stuck. I remember when I look back at that old life, that old self, in that moment, I was actually looking for a new self, right? And so as the Lord started to download all of this to me, I started to realize that what I'm searching for as a mom is not to get back to who I used to be. What was happening was I was glamorizing bondage, just like the Israelites were doing when they got out of Egypt. They were wandering through the wilderness on their way to the promised land, and they started to complain about food and what life was like back in Egyptian slavery. Like, you guys weren't eating good. You were slaves and they treated you horribly. So because you had a little bit of meat, all of a sudden life was great, life was grand, and it wasn't. Sometimes we can be fixated on the high points of life in our old past, in our old selves, and we forget the low points. We forget the points that did not glorify God. We forget the journey that we've made since then to be able to grow deeper roots in our faith and relationship with Christ and into the person who he has created us to be, to do good works. Because Ephesians, I think it's 2:10 said, we are God's workmanship created in Christ Jesus to do good works from the beginning of time, before the foundation of the world. And so we don't want to ever glamorize the past. We don't want to have a backwards looking view of what life was like and when we're called to be moving forward. Because if you remember the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, Lot's wife ended up being turned into a pillar of salt because the angels of the Lord who came there to rescue Lot and his wife and his family said, don't turn back to Sodom and Gomorrah lest you meet destruction. And she turned back because in that moment she was regretting when she was leaving instead of looking forward to the promise of God and what he has in the future. And I wanted to record this video for you because I want you to understand that God's promises are ahead of you and not behind you. So subconsciously, when we say we want to get back to our old self, we're actually coming into agreement with our past, with backwardsness. But what we really need to say, which is why it's so important to change the language, is to say, I want to be who God has called me to be. Yes, we've all gone through stuff. Yes, we've gone through warfare. Yes, we've gone through pain. Yes, we've gone through things that feel like they have derailed our destinies. But what we're really looking to is to get back and to reclaim the destiny that God has for us before he formed us in our mother's womb, before the foundation of the world. That's what we need to get on, because how do we know that our old self was even on the right path? Just because it might have been more comfortable than now, it does not mean that you were on the right path. It does not mean that you had the right relationships. It does not mean that you are walking in your purpose. It did not mean that you are walking in your destiny. It does not mean any of that. All it is familiar, and it might be a little bit more comfortable. It might seem a little bit more comfortable, even though it might not have been. And so I challenge you to be able to focus on the future. Focus on trying to be the you that is aligned with your calling and purpose and who God has called you to be. And so the funny thing is, as I started to reflect on the old me, especially as I was preparing this video, because, you know, sometimes, guys, I come on here and I just talk from the heart, but then I was really just searching the Lord and seeking the Lord to say, well, what do you want me to tell your people? Like, I know you want me to share the revelation that you gave to me, to stop trying to go back to the old self. Stop saying, I want to get back to the old me. Stop saying that. But like, what else do you want me to share to be able to help these ladies, these single moms, to understand why this is so important? And so the funny thing is, as he started to reveal the bondages of the old, he really gave me this epiphany that I actually didn't like the old me very much. There were a lot of things that I didn't like about the old me. So why would I go back to the old me that I was trying to change into a new me? It doesn't make sense, right? It does not make sense. And so once I started therapy, the funny thing is I thought that I was in there to heal from my twin's dad walking out on us. However, what I realized is that the trauma that I was going through, it ran deeper than that, way deeper than that. The patterns of hurt that I needed to deal with ran all the way from childhood. And then subsequent events that layered on trauma after trauma after trauma meant that I had to unravel the trauma. I had to shed the layers of trauma. I had to shed the layers of hurt and pain and suffering and trauma. I had to shed all of that. Like you shed an onion, right? All of that had to be shed in order for me to be able to meet the new me, to be able to walk in the new me. Because if we go back to the old us, we're going back to the bondage and trauma that some of us might not have even known were there had it not been for a wilderness experience. And so the wilderness experience, it might suck, it might hurt, you might want it over very quickly, but the wilderness experience also has purpose. It's to show you who you are. It's to show you who you used to be. And it's to show you who Christ is. And to show you that in Christ you will have a better future. A better future for you. A better future for your children. A better future for the people who God has called you to impact for his kingdom and his glory. And so the old you, the old self does not serve you at all. It does not matter how good things used to be in the old self. If it was where you were supposed to be, you would still be there. But you're not. And so I pray that your eyes are open to this revelation, just like how my eyes were open when the Lord gave this to me. To stop seeking fulfillment and validation and joy in the past. Begin to fix our eyes on Christ, the author and perfecter of our faith, and then move and focus on the forward. Because our life isn't meant to be lived in the rearview mirror. Our life isn't meant to be searching to get back to who we used to be. I know sometimes as women, we want to be able to get back into our old jeans, into our old skirt. Real talk, I have a couple of skirts that I'm still holding on to in hopes that I will be able to get into them again. But the funny story, as I was talking to a friend of mine, I said when I was in my 20s and I used to wear these skirts, I used to have to literally work out every day and watch what I eat just to be able to fit into them. So like now, metabolism is a little bit different, but you know what I'm saying, right? Well, sometimes we forget the struggles of our own self, but the whole point of me sharing this is that sometimes we can make the mistake of living life in the rearview mirror, searching to figure out what we can reclaim and get back, instead of searching and asking God, what does he have in our future, in our forward, fixing our eyes forward on the pathway that he has called us to walk on and run on, right? And who knows? Some of those things, as he's focusing your eyes forward, he might bring back the things from the past that were good, that were for you, that he never really meant for you to be separated from. He might bring back those things. He might bring back old relationships. He might bring back old careers. He might bring back, who knows, right? He's God, right? Who knows? But the point is that what he will bring back, what we feel like we're missing, if it's meant for us, he will bring it back in our future. But we don't have to become someone else. We don't have to become the old. We don't have to put back on our old self in violations of Ephesians 2 verses 22 through 24. But what we can do and what we should do is fix our eyes forward on the one who has saved us, on the one who has redeemed us, on the one who has kept us in all our ways. I love Psalm 91 because it talks about how the angels bear us up on their hands and they don't even allow us to strike our foot against a stone. See, this is what we have when we focus our eyes on Jesus. There is protection in Jesus. There is covering in Jesus. There is love in Jesus. There is forward motion in Jesus. And when we're focusing on the forward, we have no time to focus on the past because we're focusing on who God has created us to be before he formed us in our mother's womb. So I challenge you today, if you're in a wilderness season or if you're in any other season and you find yourself saying that you want to get back to the old yourself, you want to get back to me, I want to get back to who I used to be, right? As a single mom especially, it's very common. I've heard it so often. I've even heard it with married moms as well. I want to get back to me, right? Because people are recognizing that in some respects that they're losing themselves, and some people feel like they're drowning in motherhood, right? And so they want to be able to cling to something familiar. But if this is you, if I'm speaking to you, I challenge you to shift your mind just a little bit. And instead of saying, I want to get back to the old me, I want to get back to me, say it just a little bit differently. I want to get back to the me who God had in mind before he formed me in my mother's womb, before the foundation of the world. Because that me was perfect. Because that me was perfectly aligned with who God has created me to be. Not who I created me, who I want to be. Not who the friends want you to be. Not who society says that you should be. But who God says that you should be. And truthfully, that is the only thing that matters. And so please leave me some likes. Please leave me some love. Leave a comment. Let me know how this has blessed you, how this has shifted your perspective, your views, and how this is going to help you to move forward in life. Have a good one. Bye.